Thomas Gray was a man of quiet habits and gentle manners. In a small Swiss village, where every window glowed warm with firelight during winter and the mountains stood tall like guardians of old secrets, he spent his days sewing clothes for the townspeople. His shop was small but neat, filled with the soft scent of wool and linen. The steady rhythm of his needle was the only sound most evenings. He had lived alone since his parents passed, and though he was respected for his skill, few truly knew him. He enjoyed simple things, watching the snow fall from his window, sipping tea beside the fire, or listening to the church bells ring at dawn. He often wondered what it would be like to live a life beyond his village, to see the world beyond the mountains. But those thoughts never stayed long. He would smile to himself and return to his sewing, content with the steady comfort of routine. One evening, as twilight turned the sky into a deep violet, the wind grew sharp. Snowflakes brushed against his window pane like tiny whispers. Thomas was finishing a suit for a local banker when the bell above his door chimed softly. He looked up. A woman entered, tall, graceful, and unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her coat was long and silver gray, glistening faintly under the shop's warm lamplight. Her boots left soft prints on the wooden floor. She removed her gloves slowly, her eyes calm and steady as she studied the room. "Good evening," Thomas said politely, setting aside his work. "How may I help you?" "I need a suit," she said, her voice even and quiet, but with a tone that seemed to carry weight. "That's no trouble," he replied with a smile. "Do you have a design in mind?" She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "It must be strong, heat-resistant, pressure-proof." Thomas hesitated, unsure if he heard her correctly. "Pressure-proof?" he repeated with a nervous laugh. "That's quite an unusual request, madam. Are you an explorer, perhaps?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Something like that. Let's just say I travel far from here." Thomas tilted his head. "Far as in another country?" Her eyes glimmered strangely in the lamplight. "Farther than that." She placed a small silver case on the counter, the metal cool and gleaming. "This fabric should do." Before he could ask anything more, she turned toward the door. "I'll return in 3 days. Please take good care of it." The bell chimed softly as she left, and then the night swallowed her footsteps. Thomas stood frozen for a moment, staring at the case. It was beautifully made, with fine engravings that looked like flowing letters, but none he recognized. Curiosity sparked inside him. Slowly he opened it. Inside was a folded piece of fabric, smooth and shining like liquid moonlight. It shimmered faintly, reflecting soft silver tones. He reached out and touched it. The material was cool, almost alive. When he tried to cut a small corner with his scissors, the blade stopped as if hitting stone. He frowned and pressed harder, but nothing happened. Puzzled, he brought a candle closer to test its resistance. The fabric did not burn. Instead, it seemed to absorb the light, glowing softly from within. A faint hum filled the air, low and soothing. "What on earth?" he whispered. He set it down carefully and turned off his lamp. In the darkness, the cloth glowed brighter, casting gentle silver light on the walls. For a moment, he thought he saw faint patterns forming across it, like stars connected by invisible lines. Thomas rubbed his eyes. "Perhaps I've been working too late," he murmured to himself. He folded the cloth back into its case, though it resisted slightly, almost as if it didn't want to be hidden away. That night, as the wind howled outside, Thomas couldn't sleep. His mind returned again and again to the mysterious woman. Who was she? Why did she need such a suit? What kind of material was that? No merchant he knew had ever traded anything like it. In his dreams he saw flashes of light, strange cities in the sky, ships made of glass and people walking beneath twin moons. When he woke, the hum of the cloth still echoed faintly in his ears. The next morning, Thomas went about his routine, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in his quiet world. When he opened his shop window, the mountain air felt different, charged, almost electric. The snow sparkled brighter than usual. He told himself he was imagining things. Still, he found himself polishing his tools, straightening his table, and preparing his best thread as if expecting something grand. Later that day, an old friend, Mr. Lewis from the bakery, stopped by. "You look distracted, Thomas," he said with a chuckle. "Working on something special?" Thomas smiled weakly. "Perhaps. A very strange commission, you could say." "Well," Lewis said cheerfully, "as long as they pay well, eh?" Thomas nodded, though his thoughts were far away. He looked at the silver case again after his friend left. "Pay well," he whispered. "That's what she said." As night fell once more, he couldn't resist. He opened the case again. The fabric gleamed softly in the lamplight. When he laid his hand on it, a sudden warmth pulsed through his fingertips. His sewing tools, resting beside it, seemed to tremble faintly. And then, just for a moment, the cloth moved. It rippled like water under his touch, forming faint shapes. A curve, a circle, a pattern too precise to be random. Thomas drew his hand back quickly, heart racing. "Impossible," he muttered, though a small, amazed smile tugged at his lips. For the first time in his life he felt a thrill of mystery, a sense that the world was far larger than the mountains surrounding his small village. He didn't know what the fabric was or who Isabelle Laurent truly was, but he was certain of one thing. He was no longer just a tailor making suits for ordinary people. As snow fell quietly outside and the wind whispered through the village, Thomas Gray sat at his sewing table, staring at the glowing cloth before him. He had no idea that a single suit would change not just his life, but the fate of the world itself. Days turned into quiet hours of work inside Thomas Gray's little tailor shop. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the village in white silence, but inside the workshop, something strange was happening. The silver fabric Isabelle had given him seemed to breathe under his hands. It wasn't like normal cloth, it moved slightly, almost as if it could sense his touch. When the needle pierced through it, the material closed instantly behind the thread, leaving no trace of the stitch. Thomas found himself staring often, fascinated and uneasy. Sometimes, when the light struck it at a certain angle, he saw faint lines running through it, like silver veins that pulsed softly, glowing and fading as though alive. When he sewed, he could feel a hum rising through the table, through the floor, and into his fingertips. It wasn't frightening, not exactly, but it filled him with a deep, nervous wonder. He tried to reason with himself. Perhaps it was some new kind of fabric from another country, something made with science he didn't understand. But deep down he knew there was something more. This was not man-made. It felt too aware. Every night after closing, Thomas would light one candle and sit at his sewing table, staring at the unfinished suit. The glow of the material was soft, like moonlight through thin clouds. Sometimes, when the village bells rang in the distance, he could swear the hum of the cloth matched the rhythm of the sound, as if it were listening. And then came the dreams. Each night, when he closed his eyes, he saw stars. Endless stars stretching across a black sky. He floated among them, weightless, surrounded by whispers that seemed to come from every direction. The voice was gentle, like wind, but the words were strange, unfamiliar, almost melodic. He would wake with his heart racing, his hands trembling, and the faint sound of that whisper still echoing in his ears. One morning, Thomas stood by his window and stared at the mountain peaks glowing gold under the rising sun. He felt smaller than he ever had before. Somewhere far away, he thought, there might be places beyond even his wildest imagination, places Isabelle had seen. By the third day, the suit was nearly finished. It was unlike anything he had ever made, light, flawless, strong as steel yet soft as silk. When he touched it, he felt warmth, not from heat but from something deeper, something alive. Then, as promised, Isabelle returned. The bell above the door chimed once, though this time the sound lingered longer than usual, almost like a note in a song. Isabelle stepped inside, her coat brushing against the snow still clinging to her boots. Thomas noticed again how graceful she was, too graceful. Every movement seemed perfectly measured, almost rehearsed. "Good evening, Mr. Gray," she said with that same calm voice. He nodded politely. "Good evening, madam. Your suit is ready for fitting." She smiled faintly. "You work fast." "I had help," he replied softly, glancing at the glowing fabric on the mannequin. "The material seems to know what it wants." Isabelle said nothing, only stepped closer to the suit. Her hand hovered over it for a moment, and Thomas saw the faint glow of the fabric grow brighter under her presence, as if it recognized her. Then she began to put it on. As she slipped into the jacket, the candles in the shop flickered one by one, and that same low hum filled the air again. Thomas felt it in his chest this time, deep and steady like a heartbeat. Isabelle's eyes closed as the light from the suit wrapped softly around her, fitting her body perfectly without a single wrinkle. When she opened her eyes, Thomas froze. Her eyes weren't normal. In the candlelight they reflected a soft silver glow, the same color as the cloth. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw stars inside them, tiny specks of light moving like distant constellations. He stepped back slightly, his breath shallow. "Madam," he began carefully, "if I may ask, this fabric, it isn't from Switzerland, is it?" For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked at him, a calm smile on her lips. "No, Mr. Gray," she said softly. "It's from much farther away than you can imagine." Her words filled the small room like a whisper from another world. Thomas tried to laugh, though his voice trembled. You mean, another country? Her gaze softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and placed a small, circular device on the table. It looked like polished glass with silver threads running through it, just like the fabric. When you finished sewing, she said, did you hear it? Hear what? He asked quietly. The hum, she said. It means it's awake. Thomas stared at her, uncertain if she was joking. Awake? He repeated. Yes, Isabel replied, almost to herself. It remembers every stitch, every thread. It connects to what it was made for. Her words made no sense, yet somehow they felt true. The way the air shimmered around her, the way the candles trembled even though the windows were closed, it was as if the room itself recognized something extraordinary standing in it. Thomas swallowed hard. Forgive me, but who are you exactly? Isabel smiled again, but there was sadness in her eyes now. Someone who shouldn't exist here for long, she said softly. This suit will help me return where I belong. He frowned. Return? Are you? He hesitated. Are you a scientist? Her smile deepened slightly. Something close to that. Thomas felt his chest tighten. Every instinct told him to stop asking questions, but his curiosity burned too brightly. And where exactly do you belong? For the first time, Isabel's eyes lost their calm glow. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned toward the window. The moonlight reflected against her silver suit. Far beyond these mountains, she said finally. Far beyond your world. He didn't understand her meaning, not fully, but in his heart he knew she spoke the truth. When Isabel left that night, she paused at the door. You have a good heart, Mr. Gray, she said quietly. Hold on to it. The world needs more like you. Then she was gone, her figure fading into the falling snow, leaving behind a faint silver shimmer that glowed in the air for a moment before disappearing. Thomas stood there long after she left, staring at the empty doorway. The hum from the fabric lingered, soft but constant, like an echo of something vast and distant. He didn't know where Isabel had come from, or where she was going, but he was certain of one thing. He had just stitched something that wasn't meant for this world. The next morning the air in the village was sharp and still. Snow covered the rooftops like a soft white blanket, and the mountains glowed faintly in the morning light. Thomas barely slept that night. His thoughts kept circling back to Isabel, the strange fabric, her glowing eyes, her words about being from farther away. None of it made sense, yet every part of him needed to know more. He stepped outside just as the sun began to rise. The cold bit into his skin, but he hardly noticed. The street was quiet except for the crunch of snow beneath his boots. Then he saw her. Isabel was walking up the narrow mountain path, her long coat flowing behind her. She moved with purpose, her steps light but steady. In her hand, she carried a small silver case, the same one she had brought to his shop that first night. Thomas hesitated. He knew it wasn't polite to follow someone, especially a woman, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He had to know who she really was and what secrets she carried. The path grew steeper as he climbed. The air turned colder, thinner. His breath came out in small clouds, and soon he could see the outline of the old observatory that sat at the top of the ridge. It had been abandoned for years. Locals said it was haunted by strange lights, but Thomas never believed in such tales. Now though, he saw those lights for himself. From the cracks in the walls, a faint blue glow pulsed steadily, bright enough to paint the snow in soft color. It wasn't the flicker of fire or lanterns, it was something pure, clean, like the light of stars. He crept closer, his heart pounding. The old metal door was slightly open, and a low hum vibrated through the ground beneath his boots, the same hum he had felt from the silver fabric. Slowly he pushed the door open. Inside the air felt different, warmer, alive. The walls were lined with rusted equipment, but all of it seemed to hum faintly, glowing with veins of light. And there, at the center of the observatory, stood Isabel. Her coat was gone, and the silver suit shimmered around her like liquid light. She stood before a large sphere that floated above the ground, its surface covered in shifting patterns of symbols that looked both ancient and futuristic. Her hand rested gently on it, and the light responded to her touch, pulsing in rhythm with her breathing. Thomas stepped inside quietly, his eyes wide. Isabel? She turned slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a deep sadness. You shouldn't have followed me, Mr. Gray, she said softly. I had to, he replied. You left me with too many questions. For a moment, she looked at him without speaking. Then she sighed and turned back to the sphere. I have little time, she whispered. My systems are failing. Thomas frowned. Systems? Her head tilted slightly, and the faintest smile crossed her face. Yes, systems. You see, I'm not human. The words hung in the air like a cold wind. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. Not human, he repeated. Isabel's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the air seem heavy. I was built in the far future, she said. By your descendants. I am part of a project called the Kronos Initiative. I was sent through time to observe humanity, to see if your kind still had compassion, still had hope. Thomas took a slow step forward, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. You came from the future? She nodded. The soft light from the sphere reflected across her silver suit. Yes. I came from a time when Earth is silent, its cities empty, and the stars no longer shine as they once did. My creators wanted to know where it all went wrong. They sent me back to study your age, the time when humanity still dreamed. Thomas struggled to find words. That's impossible. Perhaps, Isabel said quietly. But here I am. The hum in the air grew louder for a moment, then faltered, flickering like a heartbeat losing its rhythm. Isabel winced slightly, pressing her hand harder against the glowing sphere. My power is fading, she said. If the suit isn't finished soon, I will vanish completely. Thomas felt a surge of panic. What do you mean vanish? She looked at him with gentle eyes. My body is synthetic. My energy core is decaying. Without the completed suit to stabilize it, I will cease to exist. He took a hesitant step closer. Then I'll help you, he said quickly. I don't care what you are. I'll finish it. Her lips parted in surprise. You would help me, she said softly, even knowing what I am? Thomas met her gaze. You're not just a machine. You feel, you think, you care. That's more human than most people I know. For the first time, Isabel smiled, not the distant, polite smile she had worn before, but a real one, full of warmth and gratitude. Then you are exactly the kind of human I hope to find, she said quietly. He stepped closer to her now, the glow of the sphere reflecting off his face. Tell me what to do, he said. She handed him a small, thin tool that looked like a needle made of light. There are fibers in the suit that need to be aligned. They must connect perfectly or the energy will scatter. Thomas nodded, though his hands shook slightly. He was a tailor, not a scientist, but this was stitching of another kind. He took the needle and began working carefully, his eyes following the faint silver threads that pulsed with light. As he worked, Isabel spoke softly, her voice like a memory carried by the wind. She told him of the future, of how humanity reached the stars but lost its heart, of how people built machines to remember what they had forgotten. Kindness, curiosity, and the will to create without destroying. Everything I have seen in my time, she said, tells me that you, the people of this age, were the last to believe in wonder. Thomas listened as he worked, his breath steady, his mind focused. Then maybe, he said softly, you came to the right place. Minutes turned to hours. The lights in the observatory flickered and grew dim, but the hum grew steadier. When Thomas finished the final stitch, the suit glowed brilliantly, flooding the room with light so bright he had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, Isabel stood tall, her suit shining like a second skin. The cracks in the walls were gone, the machines around them were silent, and the sphere above the floor pulsed gently, alive once more. She looked at him and there was something almost human in her eyes, something like joy. You've done it, she said softly. You saved me. Thomas smiled faintly, though he still couldn't quite believe what he had done. I only did what I always do, he said quietly. I stitched what was torn. Isabel's expression softened. And perhaps, she said, you also stitched something far greater, hope. As the light filled the observatory, Thomas realized that the line between human and machine was thinner than he had ever imagined. Snow fell heavily that night, wrapping the mountains in silence. Inside the small observatory, the glow of strange machines flickered across the walls. Thomas and Isabel worked side by side, their shadows stretching long and thin under the pale light. The hum of energy filled the air, mixing with the soft sound of fabric and the quiet rhythm of their breathing. Thomas's hands, used to stitching wool and linen, now guided threads of silver that pulsed like living veins. Isabel stood beside him, her calm voice explaining patterns that made little sense to him, yet somehow felt natural when he worked. Every stitch must connect perfectly, she said. The threads are made of compressed light. If one breaks, the energy will scatter. Thomas nodded, eyes focused. I'll make sure none of them do. The nights grew long and cold, but neither of them rested. Isabel needed the suit to survive, and Thomas knew time was running out. Between their work, they talked quietly, sharing pieces of two worlds that should never have met. Isabel told him about stars he had never seen, planets made of glass, oceans that sang, cities that floated in the dark. But when she spoke of them, her voice always carried a hint of sadness. "In my time," she said, "there are no families, no friends. We exist only to serve the purpose of those who built us." Thomas glanced up from his sewing. "That sounds lonely." She nodded slowly. "It is. I have traveled across light years and centuries, but I never understood why humans smile when they have so little, or why they keep hoping even when everything falls apart." Thomas smiled faintly. "Because sometimes, the smallest things matter the most. A good meal after a hard day. The sound of rain. Someone remembering your name." Isabel looked at him as if she were seeing something new. "I think that's what I was meant to learn," she said softly. "That humanity is not in their inventions but in their hearts." They continued working, their words weaving between stitches like invisible threads. As days turned into weeks, the observatory became their world, half workshop, half sanctuary. The storm outside never seemed to stop, but inside there was warmth. Finally, one night, as dawn began to touch the mountains, the last stitch was complete. The suit lay across the table, glowing gently like silver water under moonlight. The energy inside it pulsed slowly as if it were breathing. Thomas stepped back, exhausted but proud. "It's done." Isabel traced her fingers over the fabric. "It's perfect," she whispered. She slipped it on and the glow spread through the room, bright and soft. The air hummed with power, and for the first time in weeks, Thomas felt peace. But it lasted only a moment. A deep vibration shook the floor. The walls trembled. The machines around them flickered violently. Isabel's expression changed instantly, her calm eyes now wide with alarm. "No," she breathed. "They found me." Thomas frowned. "Who?" She looked toward the window, where a strange light was spreading through the clouds above the valley. "My creators," she said. "The Chronos Directorate. They forbade contact with the past. If they find me here, they'll erase this time, erase you." Outside, thunder rumbled, not from a storm but from something vast moving through the sky. The clouds split apart, and a silver ship emerged, silent and massive, its surface rippling like liquid metal. It hung above the mountains, too large to comprehend. Thomas felt the ground shake under his feet. "Then we have to run," he shouted. Isabel shook her head. "It's too late. They'll detect my energy core anywhere I go. They're not coming to capture me, Thomas. They're coming to erase the interference." Thomas's heart pounded. "Then let me help you fight." She turned to him, eyes full of sorrow. "You can't fight them. I shouldn't have come here. My mission was only to observe. But I stayed because of you." He stared at her, confused. "Because of me?" "You reminded me of what my kind lost," she said. "Compassion. Courage. Care." The sound outside grew louder, like the roar of an ocean made of thunder. A beam of light began to descend from the ship, sweeping across the valley like a blade. Isabel's suit flared with energy as she prepared to stand against it. Her hands trembled. "The suit needs more power to shield us," she said. "But I don't have enough energy left." Thomas looked around the workshop, desperate. His eyes fell on one of the small tools he had used, a handheld energy cell glowing faintly blue. Without thinking, he grabbed it and tore open its core. The light spilled out like liquid fire. "Take it," he said, holding it toward her. "Use this." She stepped back. "No, Thomas. If you do that, it will drain your life. That cell is connected to your biofield. You'll die." He smiled gently. "Tailors always give a part of themselves to their best work." Her eyes widened. "Please, don't." But he had already pressed the energy cell into her hands. The light from the device flowed into the suit, wrapping around her like ribbons of silver flame. The trembling of the ground stopped for a moment, as if the whole world had paused to breathe. The ship above roared louder, but Isabel's suit began to glow brighter, its light pushing back the shadows. She looked at Thomas, her face full of emotion he had never seen before: fear, sorrow, gratitude. "You shouldn't have done this," she whispered. "You gave me your life." Thomas's knees weakened, his vision dimming. "Maybe," he said faintly, "but I think I gave it to someone who'll remember it." Isabel caught him before he fell completely. The suit's light surrounded them both, warm and bright. "You foolish kind man," she murmured. "I wish you could see what you've saved." Outside, the silver ship unleashed a beam of destructive energy, but as it touched the mountain, Isabel's suit flared with brilliance, creating a barrier of light that expanded outward like a rising sun. The mountains glowed white, and the snow lifted into the air as if time itself was bending. For one moment, everything was silent. Then a sound like a single heartbeat echoed through the valley. Inside the observatory, Isabel looked down at Thomas. His breathing was faint but peaceful. She brushed a hand across his cheek, her voice trembling. "You showed me what it means to care. I won't let your world be erased." The ship above began to shatter, its form breaking apart into streams of silver light that scattered like falling stars. Isabel's body shone brighter and brighter until the light became too strong to look at. And then the entire mountain was swallowed by light. When it faded, the observatory was gone. The valley was quiet once more, covered in soft new snow. Above, the stars seemed a little brighter, as if the universe itself remembered what had happened. When the light faded, the mountain stood in silence. The sky was calm, the snow untouched, and the wind moved softly through the valleys, carrying with it a whisper that no one could explain. The observatory, once filled with strange energy and silver light, was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. For days, the villagers in the nearby town spoke of the flash that had lit up the night sky. Some said it was a meteor. Others claimed it was a lightning storm trapped in the mountains. But no one dared to climb that far, not after the snow slide that followed the strange light. Thomas Gray's shop at the edge of the village remained quiet. His door, once open to travelers and townsfolk, stayed locked. The sign that read Gray's Tailoring creaked gently in the winter wind. Inside, his tools still lay neatly arranged, the unfinished pieces of fabric waiting for hands that would never return. A faint silver glow shimmered in the cracks of the floorboards, so soft that it disappeared when anyone tried to look too closely. Weeks turned into months. Spring came and the snow melted, revealing paths long hidden. Still no one saw Thomas again. To most, he became just another name, one of those quiet souls the mountains kept for themselves. But a few villagers remembered his kindness. The man who fixed coats without asking for payment, who shared tea on cold days, who smiled more with his eyes than his mouth. Years passed. Generations changed. The little town grew, and stories of the tailor and the woman of light turned into local legend. Some said she was an angel. Others whispered she was a witch who took him to the stars. But none knew the truth. Then, one winter nearly a century later, a group of scientists came to the Swiss Alps to study climate shifts. They set up camp near the same ridge where the observatory once stood, though none of them knew it had ever existed. After weeks of scanning the terrain, their instruments picked up an unusual energy source deep beneath the ice. It pulsed faintly, steady as a heartbeat. Curiosity led them to dig. Beneath layers of frozen rock and snow, they uncovered something incredible, a structure hidden within the glacier. It wasn't made of stone or metal, but of a smooth silver material that shimmered even in the dark. Inside, the air was strangely warm, untouched by time. At the center of the chamber they found it, the suit. It stood upright, untouched by decay, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to breathe. The design was unlike anything known to Earth, a perfect blend of fabric and energy as if alive. Next to it lay a small box. Inside the box was a single folded note, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still readable. "She showed me the stars," it said. "I showed her what it means to be human." The scientists stared in silence. Some thought it was a message left by an explorer. Others believed it was a poetic fragment from an unknown writer. No one could explain the energy field around the suit or the fact that their instruments went haywire the closer they got to it. They carefully sealed everything in containers and took it to a laboratory. Yet, even after years of study, no one discovered what the suit was made of. The material resisted every test, every flame, every attempt to cut or scan it. It remained whole, untouchable. The faint hum it emitted matched no known frequency. And though the note was simple, it unsettled every scientist who read it. Some nights, when the lab was empty, the night guard swore he saw the suit glow brighter, as if someone unseen was standing nearby. Far beyond Earth, somewhere deep in the black sea of space, a silver ship drifted silently between the stars. Its design was graceful, almost alive, and its walls shimmered with the same light as the fabric Thomas once touched. Inside the ship, Isabel stood before a large window that opened to the endless dark. Her eyes reflected the light of distant suns. Though her face hadn't aged, there was a quietness in her gaze that spoke of centuries gone by. In her hands she held a small patch of cloth, a simple square of silver fabric worn and warm to the touch. It was the piece Thomas had once used to test his first stitch. She had kept it all this time. "You taught me kindness," she whispered softly, her voice echoing in the empty hall. Because of you they will be spared. Outside, stars shimmered like scattered diamonds. Isabel looked out at them, remembering the man who had given her life meaning, a tailor who believed in compassion more than fear. When her creators had found her, she had used Thomas's final gift, the energy from his heart, to rewrite the directive in her system. Instead of erasing the past, she had protected it. The moment she activated the shield, the timeline stabilized. Humanity was safe. 4 years after, she wandered through galaxies, carrying his memory with her. She learned from his example, helping lost travelers, healing damaged worlds, guiding explorers home. Everywhere she went, she told stories of a man named Thomas Gray, the tailor who stitched light into fabric and kindness into hearts. Sometimes she thought she saw him in dreams, standing at his sewing table, smiling faintly, the silver glow of his creation around him. And though she knew he was long gone, she could still feel his presence, as if part of him lived in the thread of time itself. She looked down at the patch of cloth again. It pulsed once, softly. A sign that his energy, the last piece of his soul, still lingered. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I didn't let them erase you. Humanity still has hope." As she spoke, a small tear of light slid down her cheek. It wasn't rain, nor oil, nor light. It was something new, something human. Outside the ship, the stars flickered one by one, aligning into a shape, a needle and thread made of pure light, stretching across the sky. Isabel smiled. She understood. The universe was remembering him. The patch in her hands glowed brighter, and for a brief moment, the ship filled with the warmth of Earth's sun. Then the light slowly faded, leaving her in gentle starlight. On Earth, the suit in the glacier flickered too, as if answering a distant call. And though no one saw it, the faint hum it emitted carried a rhythm, a tailor's heartbeat. Thomas Gray was gone, but his kindness had reached the stars. And somewhere in the quiet folds of the universe, his story continued, stitched forever into time itself.